So I'm going to give you some background here, and then we'll go through as much of this as we can get done today. And we're going to start by talking about where we are in John right now. So, or did you get the? We're gonna start by looking back in John a little bit. Because these two chapters in John 11 and 12, are transitional. And the book of John, and this is by scholars, is not, it's not in the Bible, but scholars give John like two, they call them two books, um, two different uh, parts of John. So the first part is John 1 through John 12. And scholars call that the book of signs, and I'll explain what that means. And then 13 through 21 is called the book of glory. So in the book of signs, we're seeing who Jesus is. And those signs are miracles. But it isn't just miracles, it's also what he said as well. So in chapters 1 through 12, we're learning more about Jesus and who he is and what he can do. And so those signs point to something. It's just like if you're driving down the road and you're not sure where you're going, you're going to look at a sign and say, oh, look, it tells us to go this way. And the signs in John are telling us who Jesus is and what he can do. And then verses 13 through 21, they call the book of glory, because this part of John is Jesus getting glory from the Father. So we're still in the book of signs, but at the same time, chapters 11 and 12 are transitional chapters in John. There is a sign. There's the greatest sign that Jesus did. But we're also starting to see how he deserves glory in this as well. So I'm going to give you John 1 through 10 in a nutshell. It's just going to go really fast. So we began with the prologue and then moved into the first 18 verses of John, and you're well on your way to knowing that by heart. And then we moved into an explanation of John the Baptist ministry. And then from there, we read a series of stories and dialogues and miracles and discourses that were centered around the institutions and festivals of Judaism. For example, Jesus declares himself to be the living water and the light of the world at the feast during the Feast of Tabernacles. A Jewish festival that's centered on the symbolism of water and light. And then then after that, he gives sight, to a blind man as a sign of who he is. Then John 10 closes with an inclusio, kind of wrapping things up concerning John. And this is what that says. Again they sought to arrest him, but he escaped from their hands. He went away again across the Jordan to the place where John had been baptizing at first, and here he remained. And many came to him, and they said, John did no sign, but everything that John said about this man was true. And many believed in him there. So up to this point, we are in the book of signs, but then we're going to see this miracle, and it's going to also be the beginning of the book of signs. And so Lazarus' resurrection is the last and greatest sign, miracle of Jesus. To this point, it is. because Jesus is going to raise himself, and that's even more amazing. But this is the greatest one up to this point. And so, as such, that is part of the book of signs. But however, in John 11 and 12, we also look forward to the book of glory. Lazarus' resurrection looks forward to Jesus' resurrection. And then there's two more things that are yet to come in chapter 12, the anointing at Bethany and the triumphal entry. And those will both be in John 12, the next thing we'll talk about. And so that anointing at Bethany was at the home of Mary and Martha and Lazarus. And they make a big dinner for Jesus and his disciples, and Mary takes this very expensive oil and anoints Jesus with that. And Judas says this should have been sold so we could give money to the poor. But Jesus' answer was, this is supposed to happen because she's preparing me for my burial. He knew he was dying very soon. His disciples didn't yet, but this is very close to his crucifixion. And then we also see that Lazarus' resurrection looks forward to Jesus' resurrection as well. And the anointing at Bethany that Mary gave to Jesus, and the triumphal entry, what we call Palm Sunday, so the Sunday before the Friday he died, are both tied to Jesus' death and resurrection as well. So we have in these two chapters a transition from the book of signs to the book of glory. And then I want to also talk about this idea of Christology. I think you know ology means the study of, right? And this is the study of Christ. Christology is the studying Jesus. So the study or the understanding of who Christ was and is. So John's gospel is all about Christology, all over the place. Who is this guy, right? He's telling us, Jesus is telling us, and John is telling us who he is. And John's passionate desire was that his readers would come to know Jesus to be the Christ. And you know this. I've read this to you several times. Now, Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you might have life in his name. So, even better, some scholars would say that the end of that should be that the Christ is Jesus. And John 11 is also about Christology. It may seem to be a story about Lazarus, but truly it is not. All he did was die, and nothing else. It's more about Jesus and who he is and the power that he has even over death. And Lazarus and his death are just the vehicles through which this truth is revealed. So let's talk about the death of Lazarus. Now, a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, but whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. So they mention that. It hasn't happened yet, but by the time this was written, everybody knew that story. So it was just a marker for everyone else. So yeah, I remember that story. And so that he's giving it a time stamp, if you will. So they are in Bethany. And you've seen this map before. Bethany is here in Judea, and not too far from Bethlehem, which is due west. And then between them, kind of the top of that triangle, is Jerusalem. It was close enough. Jerusalem was close enough that they could walk to it. So it's a reminder of the danger that Jesus is in being so close to Jerusalem. Um, and so, um, so I'm sorry. Uh, Mary and Martha are, and well, I was going to say it's dangerous for them, and that's a point that John will make in just a little bit. So Mary and Martha and sort of introduced are introduced, and Lazarus is introduced as well, even though he's in the grave. And then it mentions Mary, like the one who anointed Jesus. So that I just told you that was told in chapter 12, and we'll get to that. And then we also have this story of Mary and Martha in Luke 10. It's a different story, but Martha is putting on a party for Jesus, and and she's angry at Mary because she's not helping. And obviously Martha was the firstborn because you can see that in that story. And it's clear by both the narrative and the action of this story that Jesus loved these people very much. But does she ask a question of him? Or tell him what to do? When this is before she gets there.
Yes, she did ask. She was like, tell my sister.
Oh, on that one, I'm sorry. I understand why you, tell my sister to help me, yeah. I jumped back, I'm sorry. That was my bad. She says, he who you love is ill. She doesn't say, come heal him. But that's what she means, and Jesus knows that. Jesus interprets it that way. But then he delays. If you had a loved one that was very ill, I don't think we'd do this, would we? But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Don't you think it would say he loved them, right? So when he heard about it, he rushed off to them. But that's not what he did. He stayed where he was for 2 more days. So what do we make of that? There's this delayed response on Jesus's part. And he says it will not end in death. Obviously, Lazarus will die. We all know that, right? But death will not have the final word. Not for this immediate death, and not ultimately when Lazarus physically dies again. So Jesus says it was for God's glory. So God's glory, it's not so much that God may be praised. That's great. But that's not really what it's talking about here. Rather, it's saying that this tragedy happened so that God could reveal his glory through it. And indeed he does. And more specifically, so that God may reveal his glory through his Son. It is, in fact, another sign that Jesus is Messiah. And it is the last and most dramatic miracle of Jesus. But we're told that the delay, his waiting, was motivated by love. More literally, this verse says, when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. So this is hard to understand, but because Jesus loved the family at Bethany, He waited to respond. How does that make sense? Jesus knows what's about to happen. He knows he's going to wait and Lazarus is going to die. But he also knows that when he rises, it'll be a powerful encouragement to the faith of the family, as well as his disciples. It was in their best interest that it goes this way. And that's what love does. Love does what is in the best interest of the one loved. And that's exactly what Jesus did in this situation. And it's exactly what Jesus does in every situation. And we are to follow that lead and do what is in the best interest of others. So then they return to Judea. Then after this, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and are you going there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in a day?" Meaning light, lifetime. If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. So this is like this daylight metaphor. And the disciples were obviously frightened to return to Judea, where the Jews had recently tried to kill Jesus. And there was rising opposition to Jesus. And at the last time we saw Jesus at Hanukkah, right? The Feast of Dedication, and in December. So now we're still sometime between Hanukkah and Passover. And I don't even know which one's closer. We can't know that, but it's during that time from December to March or April, depending on the year. So Jesus is reassuring his disciples. He's reiterating that he is the light of the world. And there are two applications here, I think. Jesus and his disciples must do the work that God has for them while it is light, meaning while he is with them, before night falls on Golgotha. On a related note, the disciples, so long as they were with the white light of the world, must walk in his light, and he will guide them and keep them safe through the trip to Judea. That's about to happen. So now let's talk about some irony and misunderstanding yet again. After saying these things, he said to them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover." Now Jesus had spoken of his death, Lazarus' death, but they thought that he meant taking rest and sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus has died, and for your sake I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him." So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." So we see this misunderstanding of what Jesus is saying as we have before. Don't wake him up, right? Don't wake him up. The best thing for him is for him to get some sleep so he can get better. When I don't remember this because I was a baby. I was born at Offutt Air Force Base, and I was like I said, I was a baby, and my sister was probably 3. And my dad was a pilot in the Air Force, and so he'd go out flying for long times, and he'd come home very late. And when he came in late, he wanted to see us. And my mother kept saying, "Don't wake them up," because my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She finally got us to sleep, and don't wake her up. Don't wake them up. But invariably, he would come down with both of us in his arms. And he would say to my mother, they were already awake. And my mom said, I think he was like, you guys and making you wake up. And so that's Jesus says, we're going to wake him up. And they thought he needs the rest because he's sick. But that's not what Jesus meant. It meant that he was going to raise him from the dead, of course. So I can just see Jesus deadpanning. He's dead. But it is for the benefit um, of everyone, as well as it is there for their benefit, the disciples' benefit, as well as the benefit of Lazarus, Mary, and Martha. For it will be a bolster to everyone's faith. So here's the deal. Miraculous signs, are not a very good basis for faith. However, because it's like if you give a mouse a cookie.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So what happens if you just you get a miracle and you're like, give me another one, give me another one. So it's not a good it's not a good foundation for faith, but it can help us in our faith. It can bolster our faith. Um, so yeah, it's not a very good basis for faith. However, once faith is established, it can be a tremendous encouragement to that faith, and we'll see that later. And then we have Thomas saying, "Okay, let's just go and die with him." And we can't tell how he said, like if you text or you email someone and they completely misdrew, like they think you're really angry at you and you're not. Yeah, so that's the written word, which is precise, but you can't. I mean, we have the old, happy faces and things like that, but the emojis, yeah. So, but it doesn't. We can't know. We can't know how Thomas said this. He might have said, "Yes, let's go die with him," or "Great, we get to go die with him." And I don't know because it's written down. But most scholars believe Thomas is affirming his complete faith in Christ. So if we have to go, we do have to be in your light. So if that's where you're going, that's where I'm going to go. I think that's basically what Thomas was saying. Okay, so um, so okay, 17 to 19. Now, when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So this is significant. Um, so, and I talked about this yesterday, that the ancient Jews believed that the soul of the person waited around for 3 days so that to see, is he really? I mean, they didn't have modern medicine, right? You can tell if there are brain waves. You can tell if there's a heartbeat, and so the soul would hang around for 3 days just to see, is he going to come back, and is he just sick? And then on the fourth day, they gave up all hope and knew that the person was dead. So. So that's why the significance of on the fourth day, and I believe that's the reason why Jesus waited, to make no doubt that he had raised Lazarus in everybody's mind. He had raised Lazarus from the dead. So um, So then it talks about these. There were Jews there, the presence of the Jews. So that's a reminder of the danger, because doubtless some of them probably liked Jesus, but some of them were probably there for the Jewish leadership, trying to find a reason to arrest Jesus. Um, and then let's talk about the grief here. There was a whole lot of grieving going on. And no doubt much of it was sincere, but some of it was likely not. This is a quote from D.A. Carson, one of my favorite scholars, and he says this: Jewish funeral custom dictated that even a poor family, and this was not a poor family, was expected to hire at least 2 flute players and 1 professional wailing woman. That's a woman who walked around with the people and in the procession going, "Oh, it's so sad, he's dead," and that was her job. She was a professional wailing woman, and I'm sure she was very good at her job, maybe as good as I was, probably better. Um, so. Um, So this is what D.A. Carson says. Jewish funeral custom dictated that even a poor family was expected to hire at least 2 flute players and 1 professional wailing woman. And this family was anything but poor. They were very wealthy. In addition to the tears of Mary and her grieving friends, therefore, doubtless there was quite a bit of professional grief. So you had to have at least 2 flute players and a wailing woman, but you could have as many people wailing and as many people playing as you wanted. And this is a wealthy family, and they loved Lazarus. So it's kind of like today. If you've seen really ostentatious, I went to a funeral a couple years ago, and a year and a half ago, at one of the it's basically the graveyard where all the wealthy people are in. And I walked around and saw all these mausoleums and all this stuff, and all the things out for the dead person and all that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but some of this grief wasn't real. They didn't even know him. They were being paid to mourn. So maybe they knew him. I don't know, but it was professional grief. So they had little or no privacy, and that's possibly why Jesus stayed away and didn't barge in, because there were so many people there, and he wanted to preserve some quiet moments with the sisters. And probably he didn't want to call attention to his arrival just yet, because the Jews were present. So the next thing is going to be Martha's meeting with Jesus, and I stopped here with the other 2 classes. I'm going to stop